Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is April 15th, 2025, and let's get to the news and map updates happening in Ukraine and Russia, shall we? So first I'll talk about the map changes and a few updates I want to give you guys, and then I want to cover some important updates with regards to Trump statements and Zelensky statements over the past few days, and some of my thoughts about it. So let's first cover the discussions that have been ongoing the last few days by the Ukrainians, who are reporting the possibility of the Russians launching a new offensive in the spring and summer in northeastern Ukraine. As you can see, around Chernihiv and Sumy. Now, Sumy is not a surprise. The Russians have already counterattacked over the last few weeks, and there's a lot of battles ongoing basically east of Sumy city. So you can see this entire gray area, but the possibility of the Russians opening a new front in Chernihiv is a new one since 2022, where they left in April, where they were defeated by the Ukrainian forces, and you can see all these different offensives that the Russians had to leave, these different regions that they had to leave in northern Ukraine. Now you can see that likely the Russians will utilize, if they were to do this offensive again, the same routes. You can see that they're usually following the logistics, that is, this is the railway lines, so they need to get resupplied and constant resupply. So Klimovo, they had a massive military base here before they launched the attack in 2022. So this could be one axis that the Russians could open up. There's also the possibility of Belarus being used as a trampoline for the Russians, although this is quite unlikely, but it could be the case as well. But we'll keep a close watch over what the Russians will do over the next few weeks and months. But this is certainly a possibility. As we've seen, the Russians are relentless. They're committed to throwing as much meat as necessary to achieve their objectives, whatever they are. But we've seen that even 1 million plus casualties for the Russians won't mean anything. And they'll continue pushing. Even if they have donkeys and horses left, they'll continue attacking and attacking, unfortunately. This is why their military needs to be crushed and their regime completely defeated before we can actually have even the notion of a possibility of peace between Russia and Ukraine. Otherwise, we're just going to be facing a constant threat, not only with Ukraine, but also Russia threatening the Baltics, with Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and also Poland. Short term, that's a possibility as well, and Putin could go for it, feeling more emboldened than ever, with Trump lacking the guts to actually call him out. So, and I'll talk about Trump in my last slide today, but that's the situation right now in Chernihiv and Sumy. We'll keep a close watch. And another small update I want to give you guys is the Ukrainian forces mentioning that the Russians have shifted their focus, not that they're not attacking anymore in the peripheries of Pokrovsk, but their focus have shifted in the Toretsk region. So they're really aiming towards Konstantinivka. They're doing a lot of pushes right now in Chasiv Yar and also Toretsk, and also around this area of Ochretine. So this main road that then leads into Konstantinivka, as you can see here. So the new axis is Romanivka right now. They want to close out this small little pocket. It's very small, but that's their goal right now. So they're putting maximum pressure here as they're thinking that they could have more success here, because we've seen that last few months for the Russians, the Pokrovsk region has not been successful. And as a matter of fact, the Ukrainians were able to counterattack and regain certain positions. So we'll keep a close watch, but the Ukrainians are doing a great job right now defending this area of Pokrovsk, and you can see the Russians have been really struggling, partly because their logistics in the last 10-15 kilometers of the front line are very bad, and they have to resort again to donkeys, motorcycles, small buggies. They don't have the armored vehicles anymore that can offer that protection and also transport massive amounts of supplies necessary to hold their positions here. So it's very difficult for the Russians, as the Ukrainians are relentless with their drone attacks and artillery attacks as well. That's not to say that the Russians don't have those capabilities either, because they do have drone units now, FPV drone units, they do have artillery. So this is a very difficult battle for the Ukrainians as well. So that's the small little map update. Let me know what you guys think about Chernihiv and the northeastern offensive by the Russians. Do you think it's going to happen? And what do you think are the chances for the Russians here over the next few months in being successful? I think they're not going to have any success, and it likely will be kind of a gray area like what we are seeing right now in Sumy, where there will be buffer zone and kind of no man's land for 5 to 10 kilometers between Russia and Ukraine. But if they weren't successful in 2022, I can't see the Russians right now being successful with their really bad logistics that we've been seeing in eastern Ukraine. So that's the situation on the map. Now let's get back to the slides, because I want to discuss first good positive news with regards to the tragic, horrifying terrorist attack that the Russians conducted on Palm Sunday a few days ago, killing over 35 civilians and injuring about 120. And 2 of those that were killed were children, unfortunately. So the Russians deliberately attacked the city center of Sumy, and they used North Korean ballistic missiles that had cluster munitions to maximize the casualties as well. So the Ukrainians were able to pinpoint who were behind, which brigades were behind these attacks, and apparently they were able to not only locate them, but also strike back and destroy their positions and their deployment points. So we have to rely on satellite images in the next few days to see how successful that attack was, but the Ukrainians are mentioning that they were successful at hunting down some of these terrorists that were involved in this brutal terrorist attack by the Russians. And again, I want to remind my viewers that once this war is over, Ukraine will not be done. Ukraine will do what is necessary to bring to justice any Russians that collaborated and assisted the Putin regime in murdering and torturing and kidnapping innocent civilians and kids. And this will be similar to what we saw Israel do against the Nazis after World War II. And even right now, Ukraine is doing a great job. We've been seeing random scientists getting killed that were behind getting killed in Moscow. The scientists and engineers that were behind the production of these missiles. Certain propagandists that were killed. Other politicians, commanders. So even right now, Ukraine is doing active work within Russia to try to bring justice to all of these terrorists that have been promoting the death of innocent civilians, quite frankly. And speaking of which, talking about the Sumy tragedy over the weekend, we have some statements by Trump, and these are not surprising statements for me, but I want to give you guys my 5 cents with regards to his statements. So first of all, Zelensky gave an interview, I believe 2 days ago, to CBS News, or yesterday, and he claimed that he was ready to purchase 10 US-made Patriot systems that are worth $1.5 billion each to shield Ukrainian cities from relentless Russian missile and drone terrorist attacks. And following this interview, Trump, of course, saw it, and then he was asked about it, and Trump said, well, he accused Zelensky of always looking to purchase missiles, and he also falsely blamed Ukraine for instigating the war with Russia, saying that you don't start a war, again, always bring up the fact, according to him, that Ukraine started this war, apparently. So he says, you don't start a war against someone 20 times your size and then hope that people will give you some missiles. And then he also described Russia's deadly attack on Sumy, which struck a crowded civilian area with cluster munitions, killing 2 children, as terrible, but suggested that it was carried out by mistake. So this is the cognitive dissonance that Trump lives through right now, because I'm going to explain why. Ukraine, first of all, isn't asking for missiles to attack Russia, but for air defense systems to protect the Ukrainian sky from these brutal terrorist missile attacks by the Russians, which Trump seems to call a mistake. Ukraine is ready to pay in full for these systems out of their own pocket, yet Trump denies it by saying that Ukraine always wants missiles, greedy Ukrainians want to defend themselves. How is that bad? Right? Essentially, Trump is saying that this is bad, that Ukraine wants to continue the war, while this is just purely for defense purposes. How is it bad that a country wants to buy something from the United States? The Trump foreign policy, his entire campaign and presidency right now, is all about investments coming back to the US and no free aid to anyone anymore, right? Ukraine is literally telling Trump, giving him a win right now, that we're willing to do anything to purchase these air defense systems. Even if we have to pay $1.5 billion per each system, we want to do it. And yet he's fully denying this. That's a contradictory statement by Trump, right? And that's the cognitive dissonance that he's living through. because what he's displaying right now is his broken worldview that he can't seem to logically explain anymore to anyone. He can't accept that what he believed about Russia and about this war isn't actually true. And as we've been seeing, whenever there is pressure for Trump to blame Putin, when there is a righteous position to take here and say, you know what Putin did was horrifying, it's terrible, and we condemn it. A simple message that will be, embraced by anybody around the world. Yet, despite that, he always feels like he has to also blame Zelensky, Biden, everybody else, right? Like, why does he have to do that? And this is something that I've been listening to a podcast where one of the former national security advisors under Trump 1, H.R. McMaster, he says that something that is terribly lacking in Trump's administration is the positive messaging agenda. He's full of missed opportunities. Here you have a win-win situation for Trump. He could say that, look, Ukraine had to purchase these systems, and at the same time, I get to protect Ukrainian lives. Like, such a positive message could reinforce Trump's position. Yet he decides that, you know what? No, screw Zelensky. I'm not going to sell him missiles, because he thinks that somehow these Patriot systems are to be aimed against Russia and they're going to fly towards Moscow, which is, again, showing how Trump clearly doesn't have a clue how anything works. And unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of those statements coming from Trump, because he's such a narcissist that he can't seem to accept that he's wrong here, that his position is not correct, and he will not be able to sway Putin. He will not be able to convince him to agree to ceasefire and end this war. Even in the short term, it's going to fail. Even if there is some sort of ceasefire, maritime ceasefire, a drone ceasefire, it's going to be broken very quickly by Putin. You guys know as better than me that's going to happen. And, because the fact is that Putin wants Ukraine. And once he lets go of Ukraine, that's it for him. He doesn't have a chance anymore, because Ukraine will continue militarizing, Ukraine will continue arming, and he knows that this is his last opportunity to break Ukraine down. So he'll never agree to a full peace with Ukraine. And I do believe truly here, if I am to give my last comments about this whole situation, I do believe that Trump will eventually have to face reality, accept that he's wrong, because Putin is going to continue making fun of him. You guys noticed? That's a pattern now. Every time the American delegation meets with the Russians, whether it be in the United States or in Russia, again, Witkoff, his special envoy to Russia, met with Putin over the weekend. What happened Sunday? They struck Sumy. And this is a pattern, because this is not the first time. What happened in Kryvyi Rih, I believe 2 weeks ago, where children were killed on the playground, that was right after the Russian delegation visited Washington. And there's a constant pattern. Every time the Russians and the Americans are meeting, Russia sends a message that they're clearly not for ceasefire. And they directly attack civilian infrastructure in Ukraine, spitting in the face of Trump. And Trump simply just takes it, showcasing that Trump is not willing to put the pressure on Russia. Putin knows it, and he will continue to do that until it is evident that Putin is made fun of, and quite frankly, his ego has been attacked so much that I think that eventually Trump will have to do something meaningful, right? Maybe not. It's entirely possible that he'll still continue lying to himself because he hates Zelensky more than he hates Putin, unfortunately. That's something that his other national security advisor, Mr. Bolton, said, is that Trump sees his relationship with countries the same as his relationship with their leaders. So if he has a bad relationship with Zelensky, well, he doesn't like Ukrainians. But because he has a good relationship with Putin, well, he loves the Russians, right? And that can apply to anybody, right? He didn't like Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, so he hated the Canadians, and he continues with his narrative of 51st state and disrespecting the Canadians. So just an infantile leader that has no understanding of how the world works. And unfortunately, that's the cognitive dissonance that Trump will continue to live in until his ego and his narcissism is personally directly attacked to the point that nobody listens to him, nobody cares about him, and his polls, his popularity will go down, and will be completely flushed by, you know, his audience, that's the only moment where Trump is going to realize, you know what, maybe I should change my position, unfortunately. So I know I talked a lot, guys. I'm very thankful for support. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think about any of the topics that I covered today. And with all that, thank you so much. Slava Ukraini.